Neymar's story begins far away from the bright lights of Barcelona and Paris. It begins in Brazil, where a young boy named Neymar da Silva Santos Jr. dreamed of becoming a footballer. Born in 1992 in Mogi das Cruzes, Sao Paulo, Neymar grew up playing football with his father, Neymar Santos S.R., who had also been a professional footballer. From a very young age, Neymar's biggest weapon wasn't his strength or size, it was his imagination. He could dribble past defenders, change direction instantly, and make the ball seem attached to his feet. His family quickly realized that football wasn't simply a hobby for him, it was his future. As Neymar grew older, his talent became impossible to hide. He joined Santos' youth system and began developing into one of Brazil's most exciting young players. Santos was the same club where Brazilian legend Pelé had become a superstar, and Neymar soon started receiving comparisons with the greatest players in Brazilian football history. In 2009, at just 17 years old, Neymar made his professional debut for Santos. It didn't take long for him to become one of the biggest young stars in Brazil. His skills, tricks, speed, and fearless style made him incredibly entertaining to watch. Fans didn't just want to see Santos win, they wanted to see what Neymar would do with the ball. Over the next few seasons, Neymar became the face of Santos. He scored goals, created assists, won trophies, and attracted attention from clubs across Europe. In 2010, he helped Santos win the Campeonato Paulista, and in 2011 came one of the biggest achievements of his early career when Santos won the Copa Libertadores. Neymar was now being discussed as the next great Brazilian superstar. European giants wanted him, but Neymar stayed in Brazil a little longer. He continued developing, continued entertaining fans, and eventually became one of the most famous footballers in the world, before even moving to Europe. In 2013, the next chapter began. Neymar left Santos and joined Barcelona. Suddenly, the Brazilian Wonderkid was sharing a dressing room with Lionel Messi, one of the greatest footballers ever, and surrounded by some of the biggest stars in world football. The pressure was enormous, but Neymar adapted quickly. His first season wasn't perfect, but his talent was obvious. He could play on the left wing, cut inside, combine with teammates, and create chances from almost nothing. Then Barcelona's attacking trio became one of the most dangerous combinations football had ever seen. Lionel Messi, Luis Suárez, and Neymar formed the famous MSN. The 2014-15 season became the defining moment of Neymar's Barcelona career. The three forwards were almost impossible to defend against. Messi could create, Suárez could finish, and Neymar could do both. Barcelona won La Liga, the Copa del Rey, and the Champions League, completing a historic treble. Neymar scored important goals throughout the campaign and finished the Champions League as one of the competition's leading scorers. At only 23 years old, he was no longer simply Messi's young teammate. He was becoming a superstar in his own right. Neymar continued to improve at Barcelona. He became stronger, more confident, and more influential. When Messi was injured at different points, Neymar stepped up and carried more responsibility. He could score from outside the box, beat several defenders, create chances for teammates, and produce moments that looked almost impossible. In 2017, Neymar produced one of the most famous performances of his career when Barcelona faced Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League. Barcelona had lost the first leg 4-0, and almost everyone believed the tie was finished. But in the second leg, Neymar scored twice and helped Barcelona complete the legendary 6-1 comeback. It was one of the greatest comebacks in Champions League history. Neymar was at the center of it, but just months later, the football world was shocked by his next decision. Neymar wanted to leave Barcelona. He wanted to escape Messi's shadow, become the undisputed star of his own team, and prove that he could lead a club to the biggest trophies by himself. Paris Saint-Germain were ready to make that happen. In 2017, Neymar moved to PSG for a world record transfer fee of €222 million. The boy from Brazil had just become the most expensive footballer in history. When Neymar arrived at Paris Saint-Germain, everything was supposed to change. He was no longer playing alongside Messi. He was the superstar. PSG had paid an unprecedented amount of money for him, and the expectation was simple. Neymar had to deliver the Champions League. His talent was never in doubt. In France, he scored goals, produced assists, won domestic trophies, and became one of the most entertaining players in the league. But his time at PSG also became a story of what could have been. Injuries repeatedly interrupted Neymar's progress. Foot problems, ankle injuries, and other setbacks kept him away from important matches. Every time he appeared to be reaching his best level, another injury seemed to arrive. PSG continued winning domestic trophies, but the Champions League remained the prize they desperately wanted. Neymar helped them reach the Champions League final in 2020, but Bayern Munich won won the match. It was another painful moment for Neymar, who had moved to Paris partly because he wanted to become a Champions League champion away from Barcelona. At the international level, Neymar carried an even heavier responsibility. Brazil expected him to become the next great star of the national team. He played at multiple World Cups and became one of Brazil's most important players. At the 2014 World Cup on home soil, Neymar helped Brazil reach the semifinals, but an injury ended his tournament before Brazil's devastating 7-1 defeat to Germany. In 2018 and 2022, Brazil again entered the World Cup with Neymar as one of its biggest hopes, but the team failed to win the trophy. For Neymar, international success became one of the biggest missing pieces of his career. Despite the disappointment, his individual achievements continued to grow. Neymar became Brazil's all-time leading men's goal scorer, surpassing Pelé's international goal record. It was a historic achievement for a player who had spent his entire career carrying enormous expectations from his country, but the constant injuries continued to affect him. His body was becoming a bigger part of the story than his football. In 2023, Neymar left PSG and moved to Saudi Arabia to join Al-Hilal. It was another major chapter in his career, but once again injuries limited his time on the pitch. Instead of seeing the Brazilian superstar regularly producing magic, fans were often waiting for his return. Neymar's career had become a mixture of incredible highs and frustrating setbacks. Football careers are rarely simple. Neymar's legacy cannot be measured only by injuries or by the trophies he didn't win. He became one of the greatest Brazilian players of his generation. He won the Champions League, domestic titles in Spain and France, the Copa Libertadores, and Olympic gold with Brazil. He became one of the most followed and recognizable footballers on the planet. And perhaps most importantly, he inspired millions of young players to play football with creativity. Neymar's style was different. He played with freedom. He wasn't afraid to attempt a skill, take on 3 defenders, or try something nobody else expected. In an era where football became increasingly tactical and structured, Neymar reminded people that football could still be entertainment. His stepovers, flicks, nutmegs, dribbles, and unbelievable finishes became part of his identity. But there will always be a question surrounding Neymar's career. What if the injuries hadn't happened? What if he had stayed at Barcelona longer? What if Brazil had won a World Cup with him? What if PSG had won the Champions League during his prime? These questions are impossible to answer, but they are also part of what makes his story so fascinating. Because Neymar's story isn't the story of a player who failed. It's the story of a player who reached extraordinary heights, but whose career was repeatedly interrupted by circumstances beyond his control. He became a superstar at Santos, a Champions League winner with Barcelona, the world's most expensive footballer at PSG, and Brazil's record men's goal scorer. He achieved things most footballers can only dream about. And perhaps that is Neymar's greatest legacy. He wasn't just a footballer who scored goals and won trophies. He was an entertainer. He made people stop watching the scoreboard and start watching the player. From the streets of Brazil to the biggest stadiums in Europe, Neymar spent his career trying to do what he had always done as a child: take the ball, face the defender, and create something nobody expected. The story of Neymar is filled with brilliance, trophies, heartbreak, injuries, controversy, and unforgettable moments. And even after everything he has achieved, one question will always remain. Was Neymar one of the greatest players of his generation, or could he have become one of the greatest players of all time?